It's on? Okay, let me explain what you just read. I'm not going to go through all the events of missions history because I think the most important way to learn history is to look at themes, right? And especially things that are significant. So I'm not trying to give you a degree. I'm just trying to give you missions history in a way that's applicable, right, to what we're trying to do. I think one of the first things you see in early Christendom is the need for teachers. Okay, and here's the reason why. If you think about the early church, it almost all starts in Jerusalem, right? Jesus met with the disciples in Jerusalem. He was crucified, and then he resurrected in Jerusalem. If you think about the Roman Empire encompasses a lot more than Jerusalem. And so you know that in the book of Luke, he has this trajectory that Jesus is going to the nations. And in Acts, you see the apostles start going out into the nations. Obviously, the most known story we know of is Paul, right? You know that Paul in the Mediterranean, he goes to Italy, he goes to the Greek areas, he comes back and makes that trip. Most Christians know that, but the question is, what happens after that? In Paul's lifetime, you know, his preaching ministry, it was only like, at best, maybe like a decade or 2 decades, you know? So if you think about what it takes to build a church, you think about how long it takes to disciple somebody, you think about how long it takes to make sure that they disciple others, that's a long, long process. And not only that, but you know that during this entire time, people are still going out too. It's not like you just stay at a church, you know, your entire life and you never travel. There's merchants, there's people who, you know, are seafarers, they travel for work, things like that. And so what you start seeing is that you see Christianity spread throughout the empire. There is actually a map, if you look at it, right? This is basically a map of Western Europe. And Christianity starts spreading out throughout the empire. So here's the key thing. When you have a rapid expansion, you always have the need for teaching. Because you have a lot of people who know very little. Right? And that's not saying they're not Christians, they're just saying that they know very little. I think today we take for granted the fact that we can read. That's something that wasn't common back in the day. Most people could not read back in the day. I mean, the idea of literacy is something that happened after the Reformation. It's when the Bible first became into print and then people started to read it for themselves. So what do you have when you have a bunch of people who start to follow God but they can't read? And like their discipleship journeys are very shallow, right? You can have false teaching. I mean, that's just the reality of it, you know? So that's why in the early period, why so many big names, some of the big names, Polycarp, Origen, is it Boniface? What did I say that wrong? Boniface, are so important. It's just that you basically have a lot of people looking to a few people who are educated to learn about what Christianity is. And so here's what's first important, Polycarp. Did you catch that name during the reading? Polycarp? You need to catch his name. Polycarp is an important name. The reason why Polycarp is an important name is because he's the last, he's the person we know of that's connected to the Apostle John. He's like the last person we know connected to the Apostle John, right? So he's a direct correlation or link to the 12 apostles. So Polycarp lives from like 60 AD to like 150 AD, right? So the Apostle John, if you think, by the time he was like 80 AD, he's really old at that point, right? But Polycarp is a disciple of Apostle John, so he lives to 150. So he kind of links the two periods. Polycarp is interesting because he teaches the church, he fights a lot of heresies, again, because he's connected to the Apostle John, so he knows Orthodox teaching. Yeah. Because John was with Jesus. You know, he doesn't get more Orthodox than that. So when Polycarp teaches, people trust in what he says. And that's why he has a whole lot of authority, because he's actually connected with the original 12. And then I'm going to transition into the second part. You have teachers who are important, but also the second part who are important are the martyrs. The reason why the martyrs are important because in the early Roman period, there's still a lot of resistance, right, to Christians, because most of the empire is not Christian, right? The emperor himself is not Christian. Not only that, the emperor himself heads a religion that's opposed to Christianity, because there's the whole in the Roman Empire there's a cult of emperor worship. So like if you look at the Roman pantheon, there's actually statues of emperors in there, and it's just because the emperor himself is a god, and so they actually call Christians pagans because of that, and so it's an important reason to understand why Christians are martyrs. It's not because they want to be martyrs, and it's not because the Romans want to kill them. If you think about it, if you kill somebody, it's actually a big deal, right? Like, I think people today, it's really simplistic just to think like, oh, they just wanted to kill Christians. Look, anytime the government kills people, people get upset. Okay? First of all, if you're a soldier, you don't want to just kill people because you're still a human being. Right? Second of all, like, who do you kill? Because you kill a farmer, now you have less food. You kill such and such, now you have less, such and such. And so a lot of times the martyrs are going to be people of importance who are basically, causing trouble. Here's why they would cause trouble. If you have a cult of emperor worship, basically saying that the emperor is God, we follow the emperor. And then you have Christians saying we will not bow to the emperor. What does that look like? That's not just opposing religions, that's also rebellion. So there's that fine line you have to walk as a Christian, right? There's a fine line of like, how much do I live for Christ and just do everything that Christ commands me to do, while still working under the government. That's why Peter in his letters he always says to submit to every authority, because there's a temptation in Christianity just to be like, we have our own law, forget all of you, So another thing with the martyrs is that government officials are always scared when someone gains too much power. Right? So for example, like say you live in a city of 1,000 people, right? Like it's a really small town, and you have a little mayor guy. Okay, let's say 500 people in that city become Christians. Now who has actually more power, the mayor or the bishop? You know what I'm saying? And so there's always been that struggle. You see it later on when the Pope rises up, right, and the Christendom. You see that struggle between political powers and Christian leaders. Right? And so there's that. And so there's like this uneasy tension where like the political powers are basically saying like, if you step out of hand, we're going to crack down on you. But at the same time, we don't want to crack down on you because you have soldiers, but they have the people. If you crack down on a bishop, for example, like you're gonna get crazy flack because a bishop is in charge of a lot of people, right? And then when he finds out all the supporters will try to hide him, and move him around and like not let you kill him. But not only that, if you do kill him, now they're like in a fervor, right? Now like they really hate you and they'll never be ruled by you, So that's the thing with Polycarp. Polycarp was a bishop, and obviously there's some things he probably said that were against the Roman government. He had a lot of influence, but Rome couldn't really do anything about it because if you think about it. When he's a bishop with that much influence, a connection with the Apostle John, if you want to kill him, his followers are going to move him around and keep him safe. Soldiers are going to come like, where's Polycarp? I'm like, I don't know. And so he lives to like 90 to 100 something years old, whatever it is, 160, 100 years old. But towards the end of his life, a series of events happened, and they finally, okay, we're going to kill Polycarp. And so the way the legend goes, no one really knows, right? We only have recent testimony. The way the legend goes is that Rome comes to Polycarp and they say, renounce Christ. And then he says, I have followed Christ for 80-something years of my life. He has done no harm to me. How can I renounce him now? And so they tie him to a stake and they burn him at the stake. And the way the legend goes is that the fire actually doesn't burn Polycarp. The way the legend goes is that he sits in the fire, it doesn't touch him, he doesn't die. And then it takes a Roman soldier to stab him before they finally kill him. But that's kind of it tells you something about early Christianity. You have these leaders and teachers who are really important there because they're going around, they're teaching people who are not literate, right? What Christianity is, and because whenever you have Christianity spread out between a lot of different places, you're gonna have heresy. All right? It's just because people are so different, the cultures are so different. You kind of influence different things into Christianity, right? Another thing with martyrs is that it gives fire to Christianity. It makes it a lot more serious of a thing. You're not just kind of following Jesus, but it's something that you realize you have to give your life for. And so I think especially like imagine if you saw Polycarp die. Imagine Polycarp was your bishop for like your entire adult life, and then at the moment he dies, you see him say, Christ has never done me wrong. How can I renounce him now? I mean, what does that do for you as a person? You're just like, man, that's the kind of person I want to live up to and be like. So it gives kind of a strength to Christianity. It gives kind of a resilience to the Christianity. So obviously, I think you see a lot of parallels between the early Christianity and some of the things that missions is today. There always needs to be teachers. Okay, even when there is literacy, there always needs to be teachers in the church who give proper teaching and show what proper teaching looks like. Right, and those teachers hopefully are examples. Because more than anything, what really fueled Christianity in the early period is you have leaders who are living it out and being an example to the congregation. I mean, if you think about a person who is not literate, it really doesn't matter what you say to him, right? Because that person that doesn't think that way in terms of academic terms, he's not literate, right? That person only thinks in terms of stories and what he's seen. And so, when you have the early martyrs, what the thing that teaches them the most is what does a Christian life look like? And that's always been the story of mission. That's the idea of incarnational mission, is that there's what I say and then how I live. Because the way I live heavily influences the way you see Jesus Christ. And that's the whole idea of the incarnational ministry. Any questions on this early Christian period? Okay, good. Was this kind of helpful to you? Kind of see?
Yeah, definitely.
Is this the first time you've seen some of the stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Again, this is a long section, so obviously I don't